Okay, so we will pick up where we left off, starting on page 17 with the pureed food diet. This will start after you finish your 2 weeks of the full liquids. The purpose of this stage is to break down the food before you eat it so that your stomach can get ready to handle more solid foods. So again, this stage will last about 1 week, and the protein goal and the fluid goal are still the same. So the fluid goal, again, 64 ounces, sipping constantly throughout the day. Protein goal is 60 to 70 grams. Now, you can still do protein shakes during this stage, even though we're adding food into it. So whether that's you decide to do a protein shake for breakfast or you do a protein shake in between meals, it doesn't really matter. We just want you to get close to that 60 to 70 grams of protein. So in this stage, what you will do is add all of your food, or majority of the food, depending on what you do, to a blender or a food processor. So they need to be the consistency of about applesauce or a creamy paste. Most people at this point are eating about 1/4 of a cup to 1/2 of a cup at a time, which is about 2 to 4 ounces. We want you to take that 30 minutes for each meal so that you can really register when you're full and when you've had enough. So on page 17, there is a list of the foods that are acceptable during this stage. You can do baby food, which is already the consistency that we're looking for, so you don't really have to do anything for that. You can do pureed chili or stew without the rice or noodles, pureed cooked meats like chicken, turkey. You can do cottage or ricotta cheese, deli meats, eggs, fish, fruit, non-starchy vegetables, refried beans, or hummus or unsweetened applesauce. So if you think you'd have a difficult time pureeing these foods, what I would suggest is choosing foods that are already the consistency of a puree. So for instance, cottage or ricotta cheese is kind of already that consistency. Pureed chili or stew would just be like a thicker soup. Yogurt isn't listed here on page 17, but you can do that since you could do it during your full liquid stage. Pureed fruit being like canned peaches or pears wouldn't be too bad. Vegetable-wise, you could do steamed carrots or steamed green beans. So those would all be good options here. On page 18, you'll see a list or instructions on how to make pureed and liquid food. It tells you what liquids to use when you're making it, how to blend it, things that blend well, things that don't really blend well. So you can look through that. And then at the bottom of that page, there's also a sample meal plan. So you get a good idea of what a day could look like. So here is some pictures of appropriate bariatric friendly pureed and blenderized foods. Now, a lot of people hearing this for the first time get nervous about this stage since most people don't like to eat their food blended or pureed. But at this point, you would have already done over 2 weeks of liquids. And also, when you're doing your pre-op preparations before surgery, you're also going to be on a somewhat liquid diet. So a lot of people are excited about the pureed foods, believe it or not. So once you finish that week, you're going to move into stage 4, which is the soft food stage. At this point, there's a lot more variety. Hopefully you'll be feeling pretty good after surgery, and it's just going to get easier to get your protein in, to get your fluid in. Now, fluid goal is 64 ounces, of course. This is when the 30-30-30 rule comes into play. So it might be a challenge to kind of get used to that at the beginning, but again, hopefully as time goes on, that will get easier. Protein goal, of course, 60 to 70 grams. Again, if you still choose to do a protein shake in the morning or throughout in the day in between your meals, that's perfectly fine. So in this stage, our food must be soft enough so that we can mash it with a fork. If you have to take a knife to cut it, that is not soft enough. What we want you to avoid at this point is raw and stringy vegetables, raw fruits, nuts, and tough meats like steak or pork. The vegetables need to be cooked or steamed really well so that they're nice and soft. Fruit-wise, you can do canned peaches or pears, but anything like berries, melons, apples, we want you to avoid for now. Another thing to watch out for is the spread pasta and rice. So yes, those foods are technically soft, but they're not in the bariatric soft food stage. The reason for that is because these foods are starchy, when you eat them, they get very gummy and they kind of form like a ball in your stomach, and that can sit very heavy. It can feel stuck. Some people get sick after they eat that. It's just very uncomfortable. So those three foods, we want you to limit, or I'm sorry, not even limit, not eat at all for at least 3 months after surgery. After that 3 months, if you want to have those occasionally, that's okay, but we still don't suggest having those very often because they are low in protein and pretty high in carbohydrates and calories. So the rest of page 19 breaks down the foods that you can have by food group. So it tells you the protein foods that are appropriate, the fruits and vegetables that are appropriate, starch, fat, and so on. And we gave you a serving goal for each of those. It's not that you have to reach that exactly, but it gives you a good idea how you can do that. So protein-wise, now you don't have to blend any of your food, but you can do chicken, turkey, cheese, eggs, yogurt. Fish is usually tolerated well, cottage cheese, again, protein shakes are fine. You can add, with the moving down the list, some more fruits and vegetables in as long as they're appropriate. Some starches like soups, beans, a little potato, oatmeal, those are okay as well. So you have a lot more variety during this, which just makes eating a little bit more enjoyable. So pages 20 and 21, they have a lot of important information laid out for you. I'm not going to go through all of that on this video today, but that's one of the sections I would encourage you to read through. Some of these things we've already talked about, but they're just laid out here a little bit more. And then there's also a sample meal plan for you, so you can get a good idea of what a soft food stage looks like. So again, soft foods are, this stage is for 2 weeks. This is really the last diet stage because the last one, oh, there are some pictures of the appropriate soft foods. The last diet stage is the regular diet, and at this point you're moving into a more regular pattern of eating, so it's not so much a diet stage anymore. Now you'll notice a lot of those soft foods are technically regular foods as well. So eggs don't get more regular than they do during the soft food stage. Chicken, turkey, all of that stuff it's going to be the same in the regular stage. So not everything will change. But at this point, there are not really texture restrictions, so you can try new foods. So when trying new foods, what we recommend is trying them one at a time to determine how you tolerate it. I've already said before that everybody's different. So one person's experiences are going to be very different than another person. So just because your friend tolerated something at this point doesn't necessarily mean that you will. So try a few bites of this new food by itself. Don't mix it together with anything else and see how that sits. If it sits okay, or if your stomach feels kind of queasy, you'll know whether it's good or bad. Another thing we would encourage you to do is eat on a schedule. So most people after surgery don't experience hunger signals like they do before. Because of that, if you're just going off that, you might never eat anything because you're not going to feel hungry. However, we know that would be dangerous because you wouldn't be getting in the calories, the nutrients, or the protein that your body needs. So try and keep yourself on a consistent meal schedule as much as possible. It's not that you have to eat at the same times every day, but if you can stick around the same times, that will be more consistent. When you are eating a meal, you want to kind of follow the pattern of protein foods first, vegetables second, and fruit or your starches last. Now, when this diet starts at day 36, you might only get to the protein food, and that's perfectly fine. Remember, we're having you take vitamins and minerals to make up for that which you cannot get through food. As you get further out from surgery, so a few months, a year, and so on, you'll notice you can eat a little bit more at a time, and that's when you'll want to really follow that pattern of protein, vegetables, and then your fruit or your starch. Another thing to be cautious of is this picking and grazing throughout the day. So that would be a constant mindless snacking, just picking again throughout the day. The reason why we want you to be careful of that is because that's a really quick and easy way to gain weight without really paying attention or noticing it. And at this point, you've worked so hard, you're losing lots of weight. We don't want to derail that success by snacking throughout the day. So if you are truly hungry for a snack, we encourage protein-based snacks. But if you're not, we don't encourage the snacking because you don't want to get into that habit of mindless eating. So again, everybody's different. Some people may have a hard time tolerating certain foods. So one of those things that some people have a hard time with is dry meats. So when you're cooking your meats in the soft food stage, we recommend using a crock pot or boiling your food or adding a broth or a low-fat gravy to that. And that may need to be carried out into the regular diet as well, depending on the person. Stringy vegetables, some people have a hard time with that. So even though you can now try some raw fruits, some raw vegetables, you still want to be careful because not every vegetable is necessarily going to sit right with you. And then again, the bread, the pasta, and the rice, those should all be avoided for at least 3 months after surgery. So notice on page 22, there is a little section about calorie goals, and it lists out a 1,000 calorie meal plan. When you come into the office post-op for appointments, we're not going to ask you how many calories you've been eating. Most of the time, people are eating between 500 to 800 a day for the first year after surgery. So this 1,000 calorie meal plan is not really realistic for you until you're maybe 9 months, a year out of surgery. But it's in here as a resource for you and a guide for when you get to that point. So page 23, it gives you a sample regular diet meal plan. All of these foods are appropriate, but again, it is based off that 1,000 calorie meal plan. So the volume of food would not necessarily be what you would be getting at day 36 when this diet starts, okay? So a few more things that I want to be sure to touch on before we finish up. We talked about the 30-30-30 rule, so that eating slowly and how important that is. So a few ways to do that. Make sure you're taking small bites, chew your food up well. Think about 10 minutes per ounce of food, or try putting your utensils down between every bite. Some patients have told me before that they've used baby utensils, and that's another good way to take smaller bites and slow yourself down. I mentioned keeping your food moist, whether that's using broth, low-fat soups, gravies, using moist cooking methods like marinating, boiling, or slow cooking, but you may find that you need to continue to do that even once you're into the regular diet stage. Another issue that some of our patients have is constipation. So because your diet has changed drastically and you're on liquids for a few weeks and then purees and moving on, sometimes the bowels aren't always moving like they should be or like they were before surgery. So in order to avoid constipation, we want you to try and get as much fluid and fiber as you can. Now, during the full liquid stage, there's going to be little to no fiber because fiber primarily comes from our fruits and our vegetables. So you can add things like benefiber or sugar-free Metamucil to your fluids, and that will boost the fiber content and kind of help move things along. If that still doesn't work, we have a few other options that we can suggest, but we will talk about that when you get to that point. In a minute here, I'm going to go through some homework that we're actually going to have you work on at home. And part of that is food and activity logs. And some of you may have worked on or have kept food logs before where you're documenting everything that you're eating. We have found that not only before surgery, but after surgery, both short-term and long-term, those are very useful for people and really help everyone stay on track and keep them accountable and making good choices. So if you've never done it before, that's okay. Like I said, I'm going to give you some of those to work on, but it is a good thing to get used to because we'll ask you to do that even after surgery as well. And then the last thing here, physical activity. Didn't talk a lot about that at all during this presentation, but that is going to be the overall, along with what you're eating, physical activity is very important because it helps you lose weight, maintain your muscle mass, and also just it benefits your body. So try and start physical activity as soon as possible. Of course, if your doctor okays that. whether that's starting with a 5-minute walk a few times a week or doing some chair exercises. It doesn't have to be super intense, especially right now since gyms aren't open. But if you can get outside, go on a little walk or do something at home, that's only going to benefit you in the future. So the last few pages here of the nutrition section, they break down the food groups by page. So you have starches and breads on page 24. Then there's protein foods listed, fruits, vegetables, and so on. So this shows you what falls into each food group. It shows you what a serving size is for different foods, and then what nutrition information you get out of that. So calories, carbs, fat, protein, and so on. The foods listed in here aren't all necessarily appropriate after surgery, but we're just showing you what falls into the category. So for instance, on the page on starches and breads, you'll notice that pancakes, waffles, French fries, those are on the list here. Those wouldn't be the best choice after surgery, but they do fall into that category, which is why they're listed here. And then the very last few pages are some recipes for the different post-op diet stages. There's a lot out there online. There's different recipe books, which we've listed for you on your very last page. So if you're interested, you can look into that and kind of plan ahead. So that is the nutrition section of your first class. What I want to talk about shortly now, and then we'll be finished, is the homework that we're going to give you. So normally after this first class, we would bring you into the office and have you meet with the dietitian one-on-one to review this homework. We're not sure when we'll be able to do that again, but once all of this goes away and people can come back into the office, we'll want you to come in and we'll review your homework with you. However, it's a good idea to work on now while everything is fresh in your brain so that you have a good idea of, what's expected. So the yellow pages that you should have received is the homework section. So the first section here, I'll show you on the screen, is a sample post-op meal plan. So it looks like this, okay? So you'll notice that you have a day for full liquids, pureed foods, soft foods, and regular foods. What we would like you to do is create a sample menu for yourself for each of these different diet stages that we just went over. So you don't actually have to do it. We just want you to plan it out with foods that would work for you. So using the full liquids here as an example, you see there's a meal of breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then there's always fluids listed in between. So you can write out what time you would have these meals or your fluids, the portion size of it, what the food or beverage is, how many grams of protein you would get, and how many ounces of fluid. So way at the beginning on page 5, we talked about the different protein sources. So use that to calculate the overall grams of protein. Fluid ounces, that's not going to come from food. That's only going to be from your beverage section. Now, one area that seems to trip people up is there are sample meal plans in the book for you after each sample diet stage. Those ones are set up a little bit differently. So you'll notice in the book, those are set up hourly. So 8, 9, 10, 11, and so on. The reason we didn't do that with your homework assignment is because everybody is on a different schedule. Some people work night shifts, some people work very early. So we wanted you to kind of work out what works best for you and your schedule. So that means, let's say you eat your breakfast at 8 o'clock and your lunch at 12:30. That gives you almost 4 hours there in between to get your fluid in. So you should be able on each of those lines to get maybe 16 to 20 ounces of fluid depending on what the time is. Okay, so do your best. I know that this can be challenging, especially since you're doing all of this through video, but do the best you can. If you have questions about it, you can absolutely call, or you can wait and we can kind of go through it together when you come back into the office. The next thing we'd like you to do is keep 4 days of food logs. So this is what your food log looks like. On the screen here, we have an example of a completed food and activity record. So if you've done this before, it's very similar, but we want you to write down everything that you eat for 4 days. Those can be any 4 days. They don't necessarily have to be in order. But look at this example here. So for breakfast, it's very specific. 2 large eggs, 1 slice of whole wheat toast, 8 ounces of milk. It doesn't just say eggs, toast, milk. It's telling me how much of each of those things. It's also giving the calories, the protein, the carbs, and the fat. Okay, I'll talk about how to find those in a second. So you're going to write down all your meals, and then at the bottom if you do any snacks. And then you'll notice as well, towards the bottom of this food log, there's a little box for your water intake. So it says 8 ounces of water, and then there's 8 boxes there. So every time you drink 8 ounces of water, check off one of those boxes. And then the very bottom, you can write in any activity that you've done, whether that's walking, something at home, shooting basketball hoops, whatever it may be, you can write that in. So finding the calories, the protein, the carb, and the fat, you can do this a few different ways. The first and probably the easiest way is by reading the food label. So on the screen here, I have an example of a sample label for macaroni and cheese. So the first thing you want to look at is the serving size. So right where it says 1 and start here, you'll see serving size is 1 cup. So that means from 1 cup of macaroni and cheese, you're going to get this nutrition information. So let's look at the calories. So 1 cup, we get 250 calories. Then we'll move down to total fat, which is 12 grams, total carbohydrates, which is 31 grams, and then protein, which is 5 grams. Now, you might not necessarily be having the serving size. So if you have 2 cups, then you would have to double all that information since you had twice the serving. If you have half of a cup, you would have to divide everything by 2 since you had half of the serving. So that's one way to find that information. Another thing you can do is Google that information. So just type in, say you had red peppers on a salad. You could type in nutrition information for red peppers and it'll pull it right up for you. If you want to make it a little bit easier, you can use a smartphone app. These apps allow you to just type in what you had for each of your meals, and then they calculate all of that for you. All that you have to do is put in how much you had and what you had. So I'll tell you 2 of the most popular ones, Bariatric, which is third down on the left side, and then MyFitnessPal, which is the top one on the right side of the columns here. Those are probably the ones that people use most. So if you would prefer to keep track of your food using your phone app, you can do that. And then what we would ask you to do is just log on to your account online and print out 4 days of records. So if that's easier for you than writing all of this down and trying to calculate everything for yourself, you can do it that way, okay? So 4 days of logs. The next part of the homework, if you flip your page, on page 6 here is the nutrition questionnaire. This is 2 pages, and you're just going to answer these dietary questions as they are true now. So, you know, they're pretty straightforward. How much water do you drink? What protein sources do you eat? What are you concerned about after surgery? And so on. So go ahead and answer those for me. And then the very last portion of the homework is a goal sheet. So I just went through a lot of information on things that you're going to have to do after surgery in order to be successful. What we would like you to work on now is some of these things so that you get in the habit of them, and then when surgery comes, it's not as difficult. So there's 3 sections here on the goal sheet. You'll notice there's meal plan, habits and behaviors, and then physical activity. All of these things listed under meal plan and habits and behaviors are things we discussed during the class. So you can go ahead and select one of those things and try and work on it in the next few weeks. Or you can create your own goal if you would like to do that as well. And then for the physical activity goal, you can go ahead and write that in, whatever you'd like to do, okay? So those 4 things are what we want you to do for your homework. The sample post-op meal plan, the 4 days of the logs, the nutrition questionnaire, and then the goal sheet, okay? So like I said earlier, next time we're able to see you in the office, we'll go through that with you together. So if you have questions on it, don't hesitate to call and ask. Or like I said, we can always go through it. If you leave some of it blank, that's no big deal. So this is the initial class. I'm all finished going through the information. I'll probably be contacting you soon once I've seen that you've watched the video so that we can discuss some things and I can answer any questions that you have. thank you for being flexible and for being willing to watch this video recording. We really appreciate it, and we hope that it was pretty clear. So just call us if you have any questions, and we will be in contact soon. Bye.